I'm Claire. I'm 39. And for 4 months, I was a 15-year-old girl named Sara, lonely and misunderstood and exactly what a predator wanted, because I needed to become the bait that caught the man who was hunting my daughter. This is not a story about heroism. It's a story about the version of yourself you become when the system can't help you, when the law sees nothing illegal, when the only way to protect your child is to enter the darkness yourself and hope you remember how to find the exit. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories, where we tell quiet stories about families, about the predators we don't see until they are inside our homes, and about the mothers who become something else to keep their children safe. If a story ever made you feel less alone, that's why we're here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's walk through this one together. Here's my story. The first time I noticed something wrong with Emma, she was smiling at her phone at 2 a.m. I was coming home from a night shift at Seattle Children's, my scrub still smelling of antiseptic and the particular sadness of pediatric oncology. Emma was supposed to be asleep school night, strict rules, the boundaries I'd built like fortresses around her childhood. But her door was cracked, light spilling into the hallway, and I heard it, not the giggle of a teenager watching videos but something softer. Intimate, the sound of someone being seen. I pushed the door open. Emma, startled, shoved the phone under her pillow, the reflex too fast, too practiced. "Mom, you scared me. Who are you talking to?" "No one, just a friend, Sara, from school." I'd never heard of Sara. Emma had been at Franklin Middle for 2 years, and I knew every name she mentioned, the dramas, the crushes, the friendships that lasted weeks and dissolved over lunch tables. Sara was new, and Emma's face when she said the name was not the face of a girl talking to a friend, it was the face of someone holding a secret that felt like power. "Since when do you have a friend named Sara?" "Since, I don't know, a few weeks." Emma sat up, pulling the blanket to her chin, a barrier between us. "She's really nice, Mom. She gets me, like actually gets me." The phrase landed like a stone. Actually gets me. The words every parent dreads, the translation of which is, you don't. I didn't push. I'd learned not to push with Emma, who'd inherited my stubbornness and her father's talent for withdrawal. I kissed her forehead, told her to sleep, and went to my own room where I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, remembering every article I'd read about online predators, every warning I'd given Emma about strangers, every confidence I'd had that my vigilance was enough. It wasn't. I knew it the way nurses know infection, by the subtle signs, the slight fever, the wrong color in the wound. Emma changed over the next month. Not dramatically, not the sudden withdrawal that parenting books describe, not the obvious red flags that teachers are trained to notice. She changed in ways that almost looked like improvement. She was happier, more engaged with school. She started wearing makeup, not the heavy kind I'd fought against, but subtle, careful, the kind that suggested someone was helping her choose. She talked about English class with enthusiasm she'd never shown before. "Mr. Bennett is amazing, Mom. He makes us feel like our opinions matter." Mr. Bennett. I'd met him at parent-teacher conferences, 32, handsome in a tired way, the kind of teacher students loved and parents trusted. He'd shaken my hand, called Emma exceptionally perceptive, told me I should be proud. I'd been proud. Grateful that someone saw my daughter's potential, that she had a male role model who wasn't her absent father, who wasn't the rotating cast of men I'd carefully kept out of our lives. Now I watched Emma say his name, and I felt the first cold thread of something I couldn't name. She was on her phone more. Guarded about it in ways she hadn't been before, tilting the screen away when I walked past, taking it to the bathroom, sleeping with it under her pillow. When I asked about Sara, she was vague. "She moved here from Portland. Her parents are divorced too, we just connect." I never met Sara, never saw her at school events, never heard her voice on a call, never found her in Emma's social media. There were photos Emma showed me once, quickly, a blurry image of a girl with brown hair and no distinct features, but never an invitation to meet, never a sleepover request, never the normal integration of a new friend into a teenager's life. I told myself I was paranoid, that this was what single mothers did, invented threats because the real ones were too large to manage. I told myself Emma was entitled to privacy, to secrets, to a life that didn't include my constant surveillance. Then I found the messages. It wasn't intentional. Not exactly. Emma fell asleep on the couch, phone in her hand, the screen still lit. I was going to move it, charge it, the maternal reflex of someone who'd spent 14 years managing the small logistics of another person's existence. But the screen caught my eye. A messaging app I didn't recognize, not the standard ones we used, something encrypted, something hidden. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. But I was a mother, and my daughter was smiling at 2 a.m., and there was a name on that screen that wasn't Sara. Mr. Bennett. I sat on the floor beside the couch, my scrubs still damp from the rain outside, and I read. Not everything, there were months of messages, thousands of words, but enough. Enough to understand that Sara was a fiction, a construct, a way for Emma to hide what she didn't fully understand herself. Enough to see the pattern that Mr. Bennett had built, brick by careful brick. The messages were not explicit, not illegal on the surface. He was careful, a professional who knew exactly where the lines were drawn and how to dance just behind them. He asked about her day, her feelings, her fears. He validated her in ways that made my parenting feel like failure. Your mother loves you, but she doesn't see you, not the real you. You're special, Emma. I've known since the first essay you wrote. When you're older, when you're ready, there are people who will understand what we have. What we have. The phrase that turned my stomach, that made me run to the bathroom and vomit until my ribs ached, that made me sit on the cold tile and cry in silence so Emma wouldn't wake. There were no photos, no suggestions of meetings, no physical contact described. Just words, careful, intimate, increasingly possessive words that created a world where Emma was seen, understood, special in ways her mother couldn't comprehend. A world where a 32-year-old man and a 14-year-old girl had something unique that needed to be protected, hidden, preserved until she was old enough. I knew what this was. Every nurse knows grooming, has seen the patterns in patient histories, the slow escalation of boundary violations that start with attention and end with damage. I knew that Bennett was skilled, patient, playing a long game that would end when Emma was legal, or when he found a replacement, whichever came first. I also knew that the messages as they stood were not enough for police, not enough for school administration, not enough for anything except my own helpless rage, my own failure to see what had been happening under my roof, in my daughter's phone, in the life I'd thought I was protecting. I sat on that bathroom floor until dawn, and I made a decision. Not to confront Emma, that would close her off, make her defend him, drive her deeper into the secret world he'd created. Not to go to the school. Bennett had excellent relationships with administration, parents who adored him, a reputation that would shield him from accusation without proof. I would become Sara, the friend who understood, the girl who was lonely, misunderstood, exactly what Bennett hunted for. I would enter his world and let him hunt me, document everything, and wait for him to cross the line he was carefully avoiding with Emma. I would become the bait, and I would hope I could find my way back to being Claire. Creating Sara took 3 weeks. I researched everything the apps teenagers used, the language they spoke, the references they made. I created accounts, built a history, added friends who were actually other personas I controlled. I made Sara 15, from a broken home, new to Seattle, struggling to fit in. The profile picture was a stock image, carefully chosen, generic enough to be anyone. Then I found Bennett's social media. Not his professional accounts, his private ones, the ones he thought were hidden, the ones where he followed teenage influencers, commented on their photos with emojis that were just ambiguous enough, just suggestive enough. I used these to understand his patterns, his interests, his vulnerabilities. He liked poetry, Rilke, Neruda, the romantic classics. He liked music, indie folk, the kind that made loneliness sound beautiful. He liked girls who were old souls, who didn't fit in, who needed someone to tell them they were special. I made Sara an old soul. The first contact was indirect, a comment on a public post, something about a book he'd mentioned in class. I read that because of you, I wrote. No one else gets why it matters. He responded, carefully, professionally, but with a warmth that was just beyond appropriate. I'm glad it resonated, rare to find students who care about literature anymore. I let a week pass, then another comment, another response. Gradually I moved to direct messages. Sara was hesitant, vulnerable, the kind of girl who'd been hurt before and was careful about trust. I don't usually talk to teachers outside of school, I wrote. But you seem different, like you actually see people. It took him 4 days to suggest we move to a more private app. The encrypted one, the one he'd used with Emma. I agreed, my heart pounding in my chest at 3 a.m. while Emma slept in the next room, while I typed words that felt like poison, that made me understand how predators worked because I was becoming one. Bennett was good. Patient. He didn't rush, didn't push, didn't do anything that could be clearly identified as wrong. He asked about my home life, my relationships, my dreams. He told me I was perceptive beyond my years, that I had a soul that needed nurturing. He sent me poems, Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, the sections about solitude and patience and waiting for love to mature. I responded with the right mixture of gratitude and hesitation, of vulnerability and strength. I made Sara someone he wanted to win, someone whose trust would feel like an achievement. And I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, context, the slow escalation that was invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it but unmistakable once you saw the pattern. He told me about Emma. Not by name, a student who reminds me of you, he said. Special but not ready, not like you are. I wanted to scream, to reach through the screen and destroy him. Instead, I made Sara jealous, possessive, eager to prove she was more special than this unnamed student. It worked. He began to focus on Sara, to neglect whatever he'd been building with Emma. I watched my daughter's phone, still checking, still monitoring, the violation of privacy that felt like survival, and saw his messages to her decrease, become more distant, more professional. Emma was confused, hurt, but not devastated. She was 14, her attention shifting, her special connection fading as quickly as it had formed. She didn't know why, I did. I was sacrificing another child, my fake Sara, to save my real one. And the morality of it kept me awake, made me question everything, made me understand that the line between protector and predator was thinner than I'd ever imagined. By month 3, Bennett was frustrated. Sara, I was too careful, too hesitant, too slow to meet, to commit, to cross the boundaries he was pushing. He began to make mistakes, suggesting meetings in ways that were less careful, sending messages that were more explicitly romantic, confessing things that approached illegality. I've had connections before, he wrote one night. Students who understood me in ways no adult could, but they weren't ready, they didn't have your maturity, your depth. I asked about them, pressed gently, the way Sara would, curious, not accusatory, and he told me, not names but patterns. Girls he'd mentored, inspired, loved from a distance. Girls he'd watched graduate, move on, forget him. Girls who'd never told anyone because they knew it was special, even if it couldn't be acted upon. I found them. 3 of them from 5 years of teaching, scattered across social media, their teenage selves preserved in photos and posts. I contacted them, not as Sara, as Claire, a mother concerned about her daughter. 2 didn't respond. One did, a young woman named Julia, now 22, living in Portland, working as a barista. She called me, voice shaking, and said, I thought I was the only one, I thought it was my fault. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't any of their faults. It was Bennett, patient, careful, untouchable, and the system that couldn't see him because he never crossed the lines that would make him visible. Julia gave me her messages. Old, preserved, a pattern identical to Emma's, to Sara's. The same poetry, the same validation, the same slow building of a world where only he understood. She'd been 16, then 17, then 18, and he'd let her go, gently, carefully, leaving her confused about what had happened, whether it had been real, whether she was crazy for feeling loss. I added her evidence to mine, and I waited for Bennett to make the final mistake. It came in month 4. Frustrated by Sara's continued hesitation, he suggested a meeting. Just coffee, he wrote. Public safe. I need to see if what we have is real or if I'm imagining something beautiful. I agreed, but I didn't go. I hired a private detective, a woman named Alina, recommended by a colleague who'd used her in a custody case. I paid her with savings I'd accumulated over years of night shifts, money meant for Emma's college, for our future. Alina was young enough to pass for 15, experienced enough to wear a wire, brave enough to sit across from a predator and let him talk. I watched from a car across the street, through binoculars, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Bennett arrived with flowers, not roses, lilies, purer, more innocent, he'd told Sara. He ordered coffee, paid, sat too close. He talked about our connection, about waiting for the right time, how hard it is to find someone who truly sees you. Alina played Sara perfectly, hesitant, flattered, young enough to be overwhelmed by attention from an adult. She let him touch her hand, her shoulder. She let him suggest they go to his apartment, just to talk, somewhere private. She recorded everything. When he reached for her knee, she stood up. I need to go, she said, the signal we'd arranged. This is too much, too fast. He followed her to the door, tried to persuade her, gently, the way he'd persuaded so many others. Don't be scared, Sara. What we have is rare, don't throw it away. She left. I watched her cross the street, get in her car, drive away. And I watched Bennett stand in the coffee shop doorway, flowers in hand, confusion on his face, the predator who'd just missed his prey. I had enough. The video, the messages, the pattern, the witnesses, but I still didn't go to the police. not yet. Because I knew that individual evidence might not be enough. He'd been careful for years. He had lawyers. He had a reputation. I needed more. I needed an army. I organized a meeting. Not at the school, they'd protect him, investigate me, find a way to make this disappear. I organized it at my hospital, in a conference room after hours, and I invited every parent of every girl Bennett had taught in 5 years. I used Julia's contacts, social media, old yearbooks. I found 23 mothers and fathers who'd wondered, worried, noticed changes they couldn't explain. I showed them everything, not as accusations, as patterns. The poetry, the attention, the slow building of intimacy that never quite crossed into illegality but left their daughters changed, confused, sometimes broken. I showed them Sara's messages, Alina's video, the careful escalation that was invisible alone but unmistakable together. They saw it. Not all of them, some defended Bennett, called me paranoid, accused me of manufacturing a threat where none existed. But enough saw. Enough remembered their daughter's sudden changes, their secretiveness, their special relationships with a teacher who understood them. We went to the school together. 15 parents, documented evidence, a demand for investigation. The administration, faced with numbers, with patterns, with the threat of public scandal, suspended Bennett pending review. He was angry, defensive, threatened lawsuits. But he was also exposed, the careful facade cracking, the inspiring teacher becoming someone parents watched, whispered about, avoided. And then I sent Sara one final message. I know who you are, I wrote. I know what you do. I have everything, the messages, the video, the witnesses. You can run, start over somewhere else, find new girls who don't know your pattern. Or you can stay and fight, and I'll make sure every parent in every city you work in knows exactly what you are. He ran. Resigned, moved, tried to start over in another state. But I sent his file, anonymous, complete, devastating, to every school district in his new area, to the licensing board, to the local police, not as accusation but as information, a pattern to watch for. He was arrested 6 months later, not for what he did to Emma, that was too hard to prove, too carefully constructed, but for what he confessed to Sara, for the video from the coffee shop, for the pattern that 15 parents recognized and testified to. 10 years, sex offender registry, a career destroyed, a life contained. I told Emma the truth. Not everything, not Sara, not the deception, not the months I spent becoming what I hunted. Just that I'd discovered Bennett's pattern, that he couldn't hurt her anymore, that she was safe. She was angry. Furious, actually, that I'd invaded her privacy, that I'd kept secrets, that I hadn't trusted her to handle it herself. I'm not a child, Mom, I would have told you eventually. Eventually might have been too late, I said. And I'm sorry. Sorry for not seeing sooner, sorry for spying, sorry for being the kind of mother who has to become someone else to protect you. But I'm not sorry for keeping you safe. I'll never be sorry for that. She didn't forgive me immediately. We went to therapy together, separately, the work of rebuilding trust that I'd broken even as I saved her from worse. She graduated high school, went to college, became someone who understood, finally, that her mother's paranoia was love distorted by fear, that the invasion of privacy was violation but also survival. I deleted Sara's accounts, all of them, the history, the friends, the carefully constructed persona that had never existed but had felt in moments more real than Claire. I deleted her with a grief I didn't expect, a mourning for the girl I'd been, the vulnerability I'd performed, the darkness I'd entered and somehow found my way out of. But I didn't forget. I still wake at 3 a.m. sometimes, heart pounding, reaching for a phone that isn't there, typing messages to someone who doesn't exist. I still smell the antiseptic of the hospital and remember the bathroom floor where I vomited and decided to become a monster to catch a monster. I still wonder if I lost something in those months. If the part of me that was Sara, patient, manipulative, willing to deceive, is still there, dormant, waiting for the next threat that requires her to wake. That's my story. If you're a parent who checks phones, who moves neighborhoods, who never sleeps fully because some part of you knows the world is hunting your child, hear me, your paranoia is not wrong, but your paranoia alone is not enough. Sometimes you have to become what you fear to understand it. And sometimes understanding is the only weapon that works. I'm Claire, I'm 40 now. I'm still a nurse, still working nights, still watching my daughter from a distance that feels safer than closeness. I still don't trust easily. I still check, still monitor, still wait for the threat I know is coming because it always comes. But I'm also still here. Still Claire, despite everything. Still a mother who would become anyone, anything to keep her child safe. And if that makes me a monster, then I am the monster that monsters fear. And I can live with that. See you in the next story.